My name is Brian, and I am an expat living in Tijuana, Mexico.
Hey, Gen Max, you just met Brian, and as he said, he is an expat living down here in Tijuana, very close to the borders. So let me break in here real quick from the editing suite. You're going to hear Brian and I both mispronounce Tijuana in this video. I apologize in advance. I know it's pronounced Tijuana. I think even when I was making this video, I knew it was pronounced Tijuana, not Tijuana. But learning a language is hard. Actually, this video is sponsored by Lingoda, which is a new language learning app that I've been using, and I'm going to talk more about that later on in this video, but let's get back to Brian's life in Tijuana now. So he's going to be talking about his life here, his life before in the United States, and also maybe a little bit of the in-between of meeting expats in other countries. So he's got a lot of experience, and we're going to touch a little bit on why he chose Tijuana. There it is, proof that I knew how to pronounce it correctly, which is almost more embarrassing. Why live close to the U.S. border? What's the benefit there? So let's go back and get some backstory of his life, maybe back when he was a teacher.
I taught high school math at a school called Casa Roble High School in eastern Sacramento County. I started there in 1995, and then I walked out in 2020. And it was not my dream to be a high school teacher. In fact, I studied mechanical engineering in college, and I couldn't really get a job doing what I wanted to do. So I did that instead. They say those who can do, those who can't teach. And so I was a teacher. And it turned out to be a spectacular job for me. I really, really liked it, really had a good time. I think I was kind of halfway decent at it for a good part of the career. And then towards the end, I feel like my effectiveness was waning a little bit. I had made a couple trips to Ukraine in around 2015. And then in 2020, I decided that I was going to move there. I looked at the numbers with my pension and decided that it would work for me, the amount of the pension. And so I sold everything I owned in California, which was a house and 7 cars and a bunch of other junk, and got out of town in like 2 months. And I retired early, or even earlier than my boss thought I was going to. And I moved to Ukraine.
So this is funny. Again, do it again. Come on, do it again.
Go back to the back.
Yeah, exactly. So Ukraine, that is really interesting. Let's hear more about that. I want to hear why, and then why leave too.
So in 2018, I had a 90-day fiance from Ukraine. She was a woman living in Kharkiv, which is on the eastern side of Ukraine, and it's where some of the worst fighting has taken place and is currently taking place. That woman came to California, and we were going to get married, and she stayed 73 days instead of 90, and then we realized it wasn't going to work, and so she went back home. Then in 2020, I met a woman online. I decided I wanted to go visit her, so over the summer I went to see her, and then we decided it was looking like we were going to start a relationship. So I went there, retired early, and then I lived in the city of Lviv on the very western side of Ukraine, near Poland. And then when that relationship ended, I moved to the city of Odessa. And then I had a relationship with another Ukrainian woman, and that was great. And then after that ended, I stuck around. Well, the sabers were rattling at that time. I think probably outside of Ukraine, it was not as much of a concern or not as well known. It's kind of a local story that didn't mean very much. But for me and fellow expats, it was a little more on our radar. I guess it was February 22nd, February 24th, 2022. I usually have my phone shut off overnight. I turn on my phone and there's like 17 text messages from in the morning from my family back home, asking me if I was okay. And so, of course, I turned on the news and I realized that the Russian invasion had begun. I had a bug out plan in place. I had a Fiat 500, and I had a bicycle rack on the back, and I had a way to carry my dog on the bicycle. And my plan was to go to Moldova, which was only a 45-minute drive with no traffic, and I assumed that the border was going to be completely blocked. My plan was to ditch the car, get on the bicycle with my dog, and ride to the border, and hopefully Moldova would let me cross. Well, as it turned out, I got out quite early as compared to many other people, and the border crossing was only 5 hours in a car. As I was walking out of my building, a Ukrainian woman was leaving also. She decided to ride with me in my car, and so the two of us crossed together. We got the dog there, and I left.
Now, fleeing a war might be one of the few things that's more difficult than learning a new language, especially as an adult. And that's why I've been trying out Lingoda. And their tagline is something like, learning a language is difficult, we make it easy, crossed out, easier. Because the reality is it's going to be a big lift to learn a language, as I said, especially as an adult or an older adult. So I'm really liking this platform, and I want to talk about it really briefly before we get back to Brian. So Lingoda has 3 models: Sprint, Flex, and Teams. Teams is when you're learning with the same group of people the entire time. I am in Flex, which is you can choose to attend classes whenever you want and whatever topic you want to learn, and it's a group class of up to 5 students. And then Sprint is kind of like a challenge where you get 2 months to go through 30 or 60 classes, your choice. And if you follow all the rules and get through, you get half of your money back. So you're going to start out by taking a quick test to figure out what level you're at. And then what's great with Flex is that I can choose the topic and the time that I want to take a class. And then you get grouped in with 5 other students in the different areas that you choose from. You choose from the schedule, you can choose the instructor, all those things are up to you. And it's a very structured learning environment. So there are kind of PDFs that they go through that every instructor is using the same curriculum. So it's very similar to what I've done in the past, which is to hire a specific instructor to teach me and go through. But this is probably a little more thought through because it is a designed curriculum and all the instructors are following the same design. Now, every time I go to one of these classes, I start out with this kind of feeling in my stomach of like, oh, am I going to be the dumbest one in the class? And I look and I see the other students and I'm like, oh my God, that guy looks smarter. That woman looks like she's going to be smarter than me, speak better than me. And it's great to be in a class with other people who are making some of the same mistakes that I make and who are stumbling and kind of struggling the same way I do. Anche ora vive en Buenos Aires. El próximo año va a volver a Córdoba con mi familia. So not only do I get to have that boost of confidence that I'm learning at the same pace as other people, but also it gives me time to kind of go through the same exercises. So say we're supposed to be reading a sentence out loud or something. If someone's struggling with it, it gives me time to go through and do all the work in my head. So I feel like this is a really great way for me to learn. Now, I do have a discount code for you. So if you use the link down below, you're going to get $25 off. So give it a try. I think this is a really great option. They have like a free 7-day trial, so you can try up to 3 classes before you start paying. So I think that's a great way to start. And then you can choose how often you want to go. So if you want to, you kind of get credits in terms of like, do you want to buy 1 a week or 2 a week or 3 a week, or however many hours you want to do each week. If you're doing, like I said, group classes like I'm doing, there's different options for if you're doing private lessons or teams. So I think if you're going to settle in Mexico, you really should learn at least some of the language, and Lingoda, I think, is a really great tool for doing that. But let's get back to Brian because he's still in Eastern Europe. He'll be coming to Mexico soon, but let's join him after leaving Ukraine.
I went to Moldova, and Moldova was extremely welcoming. To me, it seems worth mentioning just incredible hospitality of Poland, which did not directly affect me, but I assumed that, Poland and Moldova and Romania would just say, hey, we just can't take, unlimited numbers of refugees. Well, as it turned out, I think Poland took 4 million Ukrainian refugees in the first year of the war. Anyways, I was in Moldova and Transnistria, I think for 2-3 weeks. And then I decided to go to Romania, visited a couple cities on my way to the capital of Bucharest. And then I lived in Bucharest, Romania for 1 year.
Okay, so we got a lot of background of travel, being around other expats, being in a war zone. Let's work our way into Mexico.
Living in Romania for a year, and I decided I wanted to come back to the United States. So I'm a California boy, lived in Sacramento all my life, but always wanted to live closer to the ocean. In 2021, I bought a condo in San Diego, kept it for a year and actually didn't live in it. I just rented it out, but I wanted to live by the water. So I was in Romania, and I was consider anything from Tijuana all the way to Seattle. What was the furthest south home I could afford that was about a quarter of a mile from the water, and it turned out to be in a place called Depot Bay, Oregon. So I bought a house in Depot Bay, Oregon, sight unseen, found it online, bought it sight unseen, and I moved there on April 1st of 2023.
So I know where Depot Bay is. I've been there. This is probably what a day looks like often in Depot Bay, except there's rain coming down because it is a rainy place, at least in the winter, probably very nice in the summer, and the Pacific Ocean is very cold there too, all year round. So let's add some warmth to the story.
So the house in Depot Bay, one criteria of whatever I was going to buy is that it would be income producing. So I bought a house, that 1,800 square foot house that needed work, and I personally renovated it for 1 year. I got up every day, worked on the house 6 or 7 hours, and that was my life. I prepared it so that it could produce income. And it is currently on Airbnb, and I have it divided into 4 different units that rent and it produces income. I wanted to get all that done, and I still wanted to go to another country. One thing that's kind of stopped me from flying to other countries was this animal right here. I just found it to be incredibly stressful to try to get her on an airplane and to fly with her. Stressful for her, more stressful for me probably. So I decided I'm just not going to fly anywhere anymore. And I had been to Mexico a couple times before. And then I started to think, I think I could make it work. And I think that, Tijuana has San Diego weather. It's if I'm close enough to the beach, it's not going to be too hot in the summer. And so I came down here in February of this year. First of all, stayed a couple months, and then went back home to do some final touches on the business. And then I just came back at the beginning of June.
So I'm guessing on a clear day, we might be able to see the U.S. border from here. We're in Playas del Tijuana, so I'd like to know why Brian chose to live here versus further down, Ensenada or Rosarito or somewhere further from the border, or even down to La Paz.
A temperate climate is like a really high goal of mine since I'm not working anymore. And I actually believe that Mexico City has a pretty temperate climate because, yes, it's much closer to the equator, but it also has very high elevation, like 6,000 feet. And as I understand it, that makes a pretty nice combination throughout the year. So I had been thinking I would move to Mexico City, tend to want to be in a larger city. But then when I started to look into the immigration rules for living in Mexico City, that sort of tempered things a bit. Also, it's very, very far over bad roads. And again, I wasn't going to fly, so I would have ended up driving, and I travel in an RV. So and as I understand it, it's really hard on an RV to even get to Mexico City. So then I also found out that the border areas, which would include, I think, all the way to Ensenada, so Tijuana, Rosarito, Ensenada, I suppose Mexicali, some other places further east, have different rules for. They kind of don't have rules for immigration. So as an American, you can, as I understand it, and this is legal, you can pretty much live here indefinitely without any sort of documentation or approval or anything. So Tijuana seemed to be the sweet spot for me. I really don't have a desire to go further south because I just have the impression that it's a little bit warmer the further south you go. So Tijuana it was.
So for those of you who follow this channel regularly, you know that Kat and I lived in San Diego, just a few blocks from the beach for winters, for a couple months during the winter, but it was much more expensive. And yeah, it was definitely more temperate here. Definitely the Pacific side of the peninsula is cooler than the Gulf of California side where we live in La Paz. And yeah, I left weather getting pretty close to 100 degrees yesterday, and this morning it's quite chilly here, and it's got that marine layer, so the weather is definitely different here in Tijuana. I'm wondering about safety, because that's one thing that always kind of pops up for me and for other people on this channel. I think of like the closer you are to the border. I mean, Tijuana as a city is a pretty unsafe place, like statistically. So I want to hear about safety here.
It's an issue, and it's not an issue that's like that looms very large in my mind. In speaking with another expat. The other day, I told him about a couple of interactions I had with Mexican people where I felt that I was wronged, to put it simply. And so I took action by, talking to the police and so on. And this one gentleman was pretty shocked at what I did and told me that he would never have done that. The concern being that, you go to the authorities, but it turns out they're not on your side. Like they're in fact on the side of the other person. But honestly, I really don't think a lot about safety, all the time. I suppose there's a higher chance of me getting shot here in Tijuana than there is in, Sacramento or Depot Bay for sure. But yeah, it's just not really something I think about very much.
And we are here in Playas del Tijuana, and so it's probably a different thing. And really, it probably gets down to, micro areas or neighborhoods that are very unsafe versus neighborhoods that are pretty safe. So do your research, I guess, is probably the key here. This looks like a very safe place. Lots of people, I talk to people in the parking lot here pulling up. Let's switch over to talk about the place where Brian lives.
When I was here in February and March, I was living in my van, essentially. I drove around the city. And I would park in paid parking spaces, and occasionally I would boondock. I mean, I'm not so poor that I need to do that, but I did save a little money. I met another dude that lives right here in this place where I'm living now, and he had told me that he pays $600 a month for a studio. He introduced me to the manager / landlord, and when I was down here in March, I did look at these places. And then when I came back this time, it was the one that I was thinking about the most. So I rented this place. So I had to give a $300 deposit only and $600. So it was $900 move-in cost. Supposedly I would get the $300 back when I live, and it's month to month. So I didn't have to sign a long-term lease. Honestly, I think it's a really cool place. I think it's nice enough, but we do have this beautiful view. But as the sun sets in the afternoon, these places are like little ovens, like those ovens that you use the sun. You get all the heat in, and then the glass traps it. And if you look around the, can't really see much right now, but if you look around the complex, you'll see measures that more permanent residents have taken to try to keep the sun out in the afternoons. Right now, I've just kind of accepted the fact that it's going to be uncomfortable for a couple hours every afternoon. And of course, actually yesterday was nice because it didn't really get hot enough. If I'm not home to regulate the, open the windows, turn on the fan and that sort of thing, then it gets a lot worse when I do arrive in the evening. I'm starting to look for something different now. I think if this place just was turned 90 degrees, I might call it perfect. I would not have the ocean view, directly, but I think it would do a lot for that temperature thing. People here still don't have air conditioning, and that's something I'm always looking for when I'm looking for a place to live, a place where people don't have air conditioning because they don't need it.
So I want to hear about his apartment here, the $600 a month apartment with the amazing view. And actually, he's on the ground floor here. So his pup has access to some actual real grass, which isn't super common in Mexico. Let's hear about the place and then hear about his budget.
In thinking about what my expenses are, I hardly ever go out to eat. I like to cook myself. I do cook here every day. About the only time I'm going to go out to eat is if I'm meeting a woman for a date or something like that. Maybe sometimes with a buddy. Actually, there's a buddy here that I do go out once a week with. My expenses, one of the reasons I did come here was for dental work. So I got an implant and a crown back here. That one's completed. I had a bone graft and an implant coming up in a month here. I think that I am paying about a third of what I'd be paying in Oregon for this work. For example, this implant with the crown was $1,600 total. But as far as other expenses, my utilities are included in the $600. Groceries, I guess, and then gas for my vehicles. So I really can't think of what else they are, honestly.
So a really affordable living. Let's hear about the place.
You put the key in the door and you break the window because it's so small, but just a tiny studio, I don't even know how many square feet, maybe 300 or something like that. Got a little kitchen in the back. I have it set up with a couple of cabinets that kind of block the sun from my tiny little kind of bedroom that I made. There's a bathroom in the back right corner with a shower, no bathtub. The place came furnished, which really meant a bed and a couple of tables and a sofa. It had a refrigerator. I bought a little toaster oven. I bought a bread maker. It had a hot plate for cooking, and I find that it's adequate. Like I can cook almost everything that I want to cook.
So Brian mentioned a couple of vehicles there. So let's talk a little bit about what those vehicles are and what benefit that is.
So I have a small Class B motorhome, and that's what I use to travel back and forth from Oregon to Mexico. And on the back of that, I carry a small motorcycle. It's a 650cc Suzuki Cruiser. And in my mind, without that motorcycle, what I'm trying to do would just be impossible. A couple days ago, I crossed the border going north in 15 minutes, where cars were taking 3 to 4 hours. So it's totally socially acceptable to just ride to the front of the line. Nobody cares. Nobody tries to stop you. And then you can cross in no time. For my like eBay and Amazon deliveries, I have a buddy that lives in downtown San Diego. And so once a week or so, I ride my motorcycle up there and collect the stuff that I don't need that I buy online. So yeah, getting around the city, the motorcycle is just so much faster. It's there's a lot of traffic in Tijuana, and I feel like without the motorcycle, I just wouldn't do it.
A lot of folks here, though, if you don't have a motorcycle, you can get a Century Pass. And so that accesses a faster line to cross the border. Actually, I'm walking across the border and I have my Global Pass. If you have a Global Pass, you can add the Century Pass. You just essentially put your license plate into the system, and then you get access to a different lane, which travels much faster than, probably typically around the 15, 20 minutes for a typical Century crossing. But you do have to pay attention to when you're doing it, because Sunday night, not such a good time to do it. So there are different ways to get yourself back and forth across the border. I've got a couple of people that I'm interviewing today here in Tijuana, so you'll hear from different people's methods to get across the border. So before I wrap up here, I do want to first remind you to subscribe. I always forget to do that. And second, I want to hear about social life of a single guy living in Tijuana.
I was married in Sacramento for 16 years, and I have a daughter, adult age daughter. I got divorced 10 years ago. I've had a couple relationships over those 10 years. The longest one lasted 1.5 years. I have kind of a relationship now that's all relationships are difficult, right? But we're experiencing a little bit of rockiness right now. Not sure how this is, what's going to happen next with this, but I'm not the kind of guy that just says, whatever happens, happens. And if someone comes along, they do. If I'm not in a relationship, I'm actively looking for one. I will not sugarcoat that. So I guess it's kind of a yin and yang. I don't like being alone, but yet I am alone. I've sort of chosen to be alone, but I don't just accept that and go, okay, there's not going to be any person in my life that I'm romantically involved with. It's something that I'm usually trying to accomplish when it's not present.
So Brian has been an expat in many different countries and single as an expat in many different countries. So he's come across other single men. So I want to kind of hear about his experience maybe with, this is kind of a good point of like, who would be good as a single man living in Mexico versus who would this not work for?
Some people take kind of a, laissez-faire approach to relationships. And if you're a man, I think that just doesn't work because culturally, I think men need to be the pursuer if something's going to happen. So if you're just sitting around waiting for something to happen, maybe it just won't. I would say the two types of expat men that I've run into the most are those who are married to a citizen of the country that they're staying in, Ukraine, for example, Romania, or really are just single and just don't have anyone. So I'm closer to the second for sure, but I usually am, like I said, in some kind of a relationship. But I'm not delusional enough at this point to think that I'm going to meet the love of my life, the person that I'm going to die with someday, anytime soon. But yeah, other dudes that I meet are a little more laid back, a little more, it's cool. Like if I don't have somebody that's fine for me. I'm not really built that way. I'm a little more interested in finding someone.
Yeah, down in La Paz, I seem to have met a lot of people who are in that laissez-faire. Like, you know, if someone shows up, that's great. Pretty much people who are happy on their own. And I think that the point here is that I want to kind of point out, if you're single and you're maybe not super great at dating in the United States, moving to Mexico isn't definitely like the cure for that. You still have to be a pursuer. You still have to like work at relationships in Mexico. And yeah, actually, I'm going to wrap up this video now with a relationship in Mexico that did work. So check out this video up here about some folks who got married down in Mexico and other expats that you can meet over here. Hasta luego.